Karen lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everything seemed picture perfect. The houses were neatly aligned, the lawns were trimmed to perfection, and everyone followed the rules set by the Homeowners Association, HOA. Karen was the self-appointed guardian of these rules. She wasn't officially hired for this role. She didn't need to be. Her passion for order made her the unofficial enforcer of all things HOA related. Every morning, you could find Karen walking through the streets with her clipboard tucked under one arm and a pen gripped tightly in her hand. She wore her signature outfit: khaki pants paired with a pastel blouse accessorized with sensible shoes designed for long walks. Her sharp eyes missed nothing: a car parked on the grass here, a mailbox painted the wrong color there. If someone dared to break even the smallest rule, they would soon receive a polite but firm note from Karen reminding them of their responsibilities as homeowners. To most people, Karen was either a nuisance or a blessing, depending on how much they valued structure in their lives. Some neighbors appreciated her dedication because she kept the community looking pristine. Others rolled their eyes behind closed doors, muttering about how Karen always has to stick her nose where it doesn't belong. But whether loved or loathed, no one could deny that Karen took her job seriously. To her, maintaining the standards of the neighborhood wasn't just about appearances. It was about pride, respect, and creating a safe environment for families to thrive. Despite her meticulous attention to detail, there was one problem Karen couldn't seem to solve: 42 Elmwood Drive. This house had been vacant for months, and its unkempt state stood out like a sore thumb among the otherwise flawless properties surrounding it. Its once white exterior was now grayish-brown, thanks to layers of dirt and neglect. Weeds sprouted wildly across the front yard, reaching heights that violated every weed-related guideline in the HOA handbook. Worst of all, the windows were boarded up, giving the place an eerie, abandoned look that clashed horribly with the cheerful vibe of the rest of the street. Karen had tried everything to address the issue. At first, she left polite notes on the door, asking the owner or whoever managed the property to clean it up. When those went unanswered, she escalated the matter by filing formal complaints with the HOA board. Meetings were held, emails exchanged, and letters sent, but nothing changed. Whoever owned 42 Elmwood Drive remained invisible, leaving Karen frustrated and increasingly determined to fix the situation herself. The longer the house stayed in disrepair, the more it gnawed at Karen. It wasn't just the aesthetic blight, it was the message it sent. An unkempt home suggested laziness, carelessness, and a lack of respect for the community's shared values. And if there was one thing Karen couldn't tolerate, it was disrespect. Every time she passed the house during her daily rounds, she felt a pang of irritation. Something had to give. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast golden shadows over the neighborhood, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. Armed with her trusty flashlight, she approached 42 Elmwood Drive for a closer inspection. As she walked around the perimeter, something unusual caught her eye. Through the cracks in the boards covering the windows, faint lights flickered inside. At first, she thought it might have been her imagination, but then she heard it. A muffled voice, barely audible but unmistakable. Her curiosity piqued. Karen pressed her ear against the wooden planks. There was definitely activity inside. Who could possibly be using this abandoned house? Was it squatters, vagrants, or worse, criminals? Her mind raced with possibilities. Whatever was happening, it clearly wasn't normal. Determined to get answers, Karen pulled out her phone and called the local police department. Surely they would want to know about potential illegal activity in the area. But when she explained the situation to the dispatcher, the response was less than encouraging. "Ma'am," the officer said after hearing her concerns, "we've received no reports of trouble at that address. Unless you have concrete evidence of wrongdoing, there's not much we can do." Karen hung up, feeling deflated but far from defeated. If the authorities weren't going to take action, then it was up to her to uncover the truth. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something big was hiding behind those boarded-up windows. She tossed and turned, replaying the flickering lights and distant voices in her mind. By morning, she had made up her mind. Rules or no rules, Karen was going to investigate 42 Elmwood Drive herself, and nothing was going to stop her. Little did she know, this decision would lead her down a path she never could have imagined. What started as a simple mission to tidy up her neighborhood was about to turn into something far more extraordinary and dangerous than Karen ever anticipated. The next evening, Karen found herself unable to focus on anything else. Her mind kept drifting back to 42 Elmwood Drive, the flickering lights, the faint voices, and the unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. She tried distracting herself by watering her plants or organizing her HOA files, but nothing worked. Every time she closed her eyes, she pictured the house sitting there, dark and mysterious, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. Karen had always prided herself on being thorough, whether it was ensuring every neighbor adhered to the HOA guidelines or meticulously planning her weekly grocery trips. She believed in doing things the right way. But this situation felt different. It wasn't just about enforcing rules anymore. It was about uncovering a mystery, and Karen loved a good mystery almost as much as she loved a well-manicured lawn. By nightfall, Karen had convinced herself that investigating further was not only justified but necessary. After all, what kind of responsible citizen would ignore potential illegal activity in their own backyard? With renewed determination, she grabbed her flashlight, slipped on a pair of sturdy gloves, and headed out into the cool evening air. She told herself she was just going to take another look, nothing more. But deep down, she knew she might have to go further if she wanted answers. As Karen approached 42 Elmwood Drive, her heart began to race. The streetlights cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk, making the house look even spookier than before. Up close, the property seemed even worse than she remembered. The paint was peeling off in large patches, exposing bare wood underneath. The front yard was a jungle of overgrown grass and weeds, some taller than Karen herself. She stepped carefully, avoiding piles of leaves and twigs that crunched loudly underfoot. When she reached the boarded-up windows, she paused and listened intently. At first, everything was silent. Then, faintly, she heard it again, that low murmur of voices coming from inside. They weren't loud enough to make out words, but they were unmistakable. Someone, or multiple someones, was definitely in the house. Karen's pulse quickened. Who could it be? Squatters? Thieves? Or maybe something even stranger? She moved closer, shining her flashlight through the gaps between the boards. Inside, the house was dimly lit, but she could see outlines of furniture and other objects scattered around. It looked like someone had been living there recently. Empty soda cans and food wrappers littered the floor, and a blanket was draped haphazardly over an old couch. Karen frowned. This wasn't the work of vagrants. It was too organized, too deliberate. Something bigger was going on here. Her curiosity grew stronger with each passing second. She circled the house, looking for any sign of entry. Most of the doors and windows were securely sealed, but one of the side panels near the back door appeared loose. On closer inspection, Karen realized it had been pried open slightly, leaving just enough space for someone small, or determined, to squeeze through. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over her shoulder to ensure no one was watching. The street was empty, bathed in the soft glow of distant streetlights. Taking a deep breath, she decided to push forward. Using the flashlight to guide her, Karen wedged her fingers into the gap and pulled. The panel creaked as it gave way, revealing a narrow opening. Her heart pounded in her chest as she squeezed through, careful not to snag her clothes on the jagged edges of the wood. Once inside, she found herself standing in a dusty, cluttered room. The air smelled musty, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly decorations. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Karen pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and excitement. The interior of the house was a stark contrast to its abandoned exterior. While the outside screamed neglect, the inside showed clear signs of recent activity. Footprints marked the thick layer of dust on the floor, and fresh scuff marks marred the walls. A half-empty bottle of water sat on a rickety table beside a stack of papers. Karen picked up one of the sheets and squinted at it under her flashlight. It was covered in scribbles and diagrams, none of which made sense to her. What was this place being used for? As she ventured deeper into the house, Karen noticed something odd. One wall in particular caught her attention. Unlike the rest of the decrepit interior, this section looked newer, cleaner. There were no cobwebs or layers of grime, and the paint job appeared fresh. Intrigued, Karen ran her fingers along the surface. That's when she discovered it, a slight indentation where the wall met the floor. It didn't look natural, as though it had been installed deliberately. Without thinking twice, Karen pushed against the wall. To her astonishment, it swung inward, revealing a hidden passageway. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared into the darkness beyond. This wasn't just a random abandoned house. It was hiding secrets. Big ones. For a brief moment, fear gripped her. Should she turn back? Call the police? But then her stubborn streak kicked in. She hadn't come this far to walk away now. Steeling herself, Karen stepped into the hidden corridor. The air felt cooler here, and the sound of her footsteps echoed eerily against the narrow walls. At the end of the passage, she found a heavy metal door with a keypad lock. This was clearly no ordinary setup. Whoever had created this space had gone to great lengths to keep it concealed and secure. Karen's mind raced with questions. Was this some kind of illegal operation? A hideout for criminals? Or perhaps something entirely different? Before she could investigate further, a sudden noise startled her. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps heading straight toward her. Panic surged through Karen's body. She ducked behind a nearby crate, clutching her flashlight tightly. As the footsteps drew nearer, her thoughts spiraled. Had she been discovered? Would whoever was coming find her and demand answers? Or worse? Peeking cautiously around the edge of the crate, Karen saw two figures emerge from the shadows. They weren't dressed like thugs or squatters. Instead, they wore suits and carried badges clipped to their belts. Federal agents. Their serious expressions and purposeful movements left no doubt about who they were. Karen's stomach dropped. She hadn't stumbled upon a criminal hideout after all. She had walked straight into a government operation. One of the agents spotted her immediately. "Ma'am," he said sharply, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "What are you doing here?" Karen froze, unsure how to respond. How could she explain breaking into an abandoned house and discovering a secret lair without sounding completely insane? But as the agents closed in, she realized her adventure was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Karen's mind raced as the two men in suits approached her, their stern expressions leaving no room for doubt. They were not happy to see her. Her heart thudded so loudly in her chest that she was sure they could hear it. She tightened her grip on the flashlight, her knuckles turning white, and tried to think of something, anything to say. But before she could form a coherent sentence, one of the men spoke again. "Ma'am," he repeated, his tone firmer this time. "You need to explain why you're here. Now." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry from nerves. She glanced around the hidden passageway, taking in the high-tech equipment lining the walls and the glowing screens showing live footage of various locations. This wasn't just some random setup. It was clearly a professional operation, and judging by the badges clipped to their belts and the earpieces tucked into their ears, these men weren't ordinary law enforcement officers. They were federal agents. Karen stammered, her voice trembling. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I'm from the Homeowners Association. I thought this house was abandoned and I came to investigate because..." She trailed off, realizing how absurd her explanation sounded even to her own ears. What kind of person breaks into an abandoned house claiming to represent the HOA? The second agent raised an eyebrow. "The HOA?" he echoed, skepticism dripping from his voice. "You broke into what you thought was an abandoned house because of the HOA?" Karen felt heat rise to her cheeks. She straightened her posture, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. "Yes," she said firmly, though her voice still wavered slightly. This property has been neglected for months. It's a violation of our neighborhood standards. I was concerned about its condition and wanted to gather evidence to report back to the board. The first agent exchanged a glance with his partner, and Karen couldn't tell whether they were amused or annoyed. Finally, the taller of the two sighed and crossed his arms over his chest. "Ma'am, do you have any idea where you are right now?" he asked. Karen hesitated. She had pieced together that this wasn't just a random hideout, but beyond that, she didn't know much. "Not exactly," she admitted. "But I can see that this isn't, well, normal." The agent nodded slowly. "You're correct. This isn't normal. In fact, this is part of a classified government operation, and your presence here compromises everything we've been working on." Karen's eyes widened. A government operation? In her sleepy little suburban neighborhood? The idea seemed preposterous, yet the evidence was undeniable. The surveillance monitors, the advanced technology, the serious demeanor of the agents, it all pointed to something far bigger than she'd ever imagined. For a moment, she forgot her fear and let curiosity take over. "What kind of operation?" she asked, leaning forward slightly despite herself. "Are you tracking criminals? Terrorists? Is this about national security?" The agent gave her a sharp look. "I'm not at liberty to discuss details. What I will say is that this location has been under strict confidentiality protocols. Until now." Karen winced. She hadn't meant to cause trouble. She'd only wanted to tidy up the neighborhood. How was she supposed to know that investigating 42 Elmwood Drive would lead her into the middle of a secret sting operation? Still, she couldn't help feeling a flicker of pride. If nothing else, she'd uncovered something important, even if it had landed her in hot water. The second agent stepped closer, his expression softening slightly. "Look, ma'am, we appreciate your concern for your community. Really, we do. But you've put yourself in a very dangerous position. Whoever owns this house and whoever we're monitoring isn't someone you want to cross paths with." Karen shivered at the implication. Dangerous people? Criminals? Suddenly, her decision to break in felt monumentally foolish. She hugged her clipboard to her chest, partly for comfort and partly to remind herself of who she was. Karen, the diligent HOA enforcer. Surely they wouldn't arrest someone like her, would they? "What happens now?" she asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. The first agent sighed again, running a hand through his hair. "That depends on you, ma'am. We need to assess how much you've seen and whether you've shared any information with anyone else. If word gets out about this operation, it could jeopardize months or even years of work." Karen shook, her head emphatically. No, I haven't told anyone. I swear I didn't even know what I was walking into until just now. I thought maybe squatters were using the house or something illegal was going on. I never imagined, well, this." The agents exchanged another glance, and Karen got the sense they were silently debating what to do with her. She held her breath, waiting for their verdict. Would they call the police? Escort her out and warn her to stay quiet? Or worse, would they detain her? Finally, the taller agent spoke. "Here's the deal," he said, his tone measured but firm. "We can't risk having civilians involved in this kind of operation. Normally, we'd bring you in for questioning, but given the circumstances, we're willing to cut you a deal." "Deal?" Karen echoed, her eyebrows shooting up. Deals weren't usually part of her vocabulary unless it involved negotiating landscaping budgets with the HOA board. "Yes," the second agent chimed in. "In exchange for your silence, we'll let you walk away unharmed. You won't mention this to anyone, not your neighbors, not your friends, not even your family. Understand?" Karen nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. My lips are sealed." She mimed, zipping her mouth shut for emphasis, earning a slight smirk from the agents. "But there's more," the first agent continued. "We also need your cooperation, moving forward. You're already familiar with the neighborhood and you clearly care about keeping things in order. That makes you uniquely qualified to assist us." "Assist you?" Karen repeated, her voice rising in surprise. "How?" The agent leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. We're monitoring a criminal organization operating in this area. They're smart, well-connected, and dangerous. Our cover depends on blending in with the community. That's where you come in. We need someone who can keep an eye out for suspicious activity without raising suspicion themselves. Karen blinked, processing what they were asking. Essentially, they wanted her to spy on her own neighbors. On one hand, it sounded thrilling, a chance to play detective and contribute to something meaningful. On the other hand, it was terrifying. What if she got caught? What if the criminals found out and came after her? I don't know, she stammered, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Isn't that risky? What if someone figures out what I'm doing? That's why we're trusting you to be discreet, the second agent said. Stick to your usual routine. Keep doing what you've always done, observing, noting details, reporting concerns. Only now you'll report them directly to us instead of the HOA. Karen chewed on her lip, weighing the pros and cons. It was true that she already spent most of her time observing the neighborhood anyway. How different could this really be? Plus, there was something undeniably exciting about being part of a real-life investigation. Maybe this was her chance to prove that she was more than just the nosy HOA lady. Maybe she could actually make a difference. Okay, she said finally, squaring her shoulders. I'll do it. But on one condition. You promise to keep me safe. If anything happens, you'll protect me. The agents exchanged a brief nod. We'll do everything in our power to ensure your safety, the taller agent assured her. Just follow our instructions and you'll be fine. With that, Karen agreed to become an unofficial part of their operation. As the agents led her back through the hidden passageway and out of the house, she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Her life had taken a turn she never could have predicted, and while she knew it wouldn't be easy, she was determined to rise to the occasion. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of her unexpected journey into the world of espionage and intrigue. The next few days were a whirlwind for Karen. On the surface, everything seemed normal. She went about her usual routine, clipboard in hand, making mental notes of overgrown lawns and mismatched house colors. But underneath her calm exterior, her mind was racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the hidden passageway, the surveillance equipment, and the agent's instructions. Was she really cut out for this? Could she handle being part of something so secretive and potentially dangerous? At first, Karen tried to convince herself that nothing had changed. After all, spying on her neighbors wasn't entirely new territory for her. She'd always kept tabs on who left their trash cans out too long or whose dog barked incessantly at night. The only difference now was that instead of reporting these minor infractions to the HOA board, she'd be feeding information to federal agents. Still, the stakes felt impossibly high. What if she missed something important? Or worse, what if someone figured out what she was doing? To ease her nerves, Karen decided to start small. Her first task was to observe the people living near 42 Elmwood Drive more closely. The agents had told her not to act suspiciously, so she made sure her behavior didn't change much. During her daily walks, she lingered just a little longer, in front of certain houses, pretending to jot down notes about weeds or mailbox height while secretly scanning for anything unusual. At first, she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. The streets were quiet, the neighbors friendly, and life in the suburb continued as it always had. But then, one afternoon, Karen spotted something that caught her attention. A man she'd never seen before was standing outside 38 Elmwood Drive, 2 houses down from the target property. He wore dark sunglasses and carried a toolbox, which wouldn't have been noteworthy except for the fact that he didn't seem to be doing any actual work. Instead, he paced back and forth along the driveway, occasionally glancing toward 42 Elmwood Drive. His presence felt off somehow, though Karen couldn't quite put her finger on why. Curiosity got the better of her. Keeping a safe distance, Karen approached him casually, clipboard in hand. "Hi there," she said with a polite smile. "I'm Karen from the HOA. I don't think we've met before." The man turned to face her, his expression unreadable behind the sunglasses. "Oh, hey," he replied, his voice flat. "Just doing some maintenance." Karen nodded, pretending to write something on her clipboard. "Maintenance, huh?" For which house? 38, he said after a brief pause. They hired me to fix a leaky faucet. Karen frowned inwardly. She knew for a fact that 38 Elmwood Drive was vacant. The owners had moved out months ago, yet she didn't let her suspicion show. That's great, she said brightly. Well, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. We like to keep our neighborhood looking sharp. The man muttered a vague thank you and quickly returned to pacing. Karen walked away, her heart pounding. Something about him didn't add up. Why would someone pretend to work on an empty house? And why did he keep looking toward 42 Elmwood Drive? It was possible he was connected to the criminal organization the agents were monitoring. If that was true, Karen realized she might have stumbled onto something significant. Later that evening, Karen called the number the agents had given her. When one of them answered, she recounted her encounter in detail, describing the man's appearance, behavior, and odd focus on the target property. To her relief, the agent sounded intrigued rather than dismissive. "Good work, Karen," he said. "We'll look into it. Keep observing, but stay safe. Don't engage with him directly again." Encouraged by the positive feedback, Karen threw herself into her role with renewed enthusiasm. Over the next week, she became hyper-aware of everything happening around her. She noticed cars parked in unusual spots, strangers walking dogs they didn't seem to own, and even subtle changes in lighting patterns inside certain homes. Each observation felt like a piece of a giant puzzle, and Karen was determined to fit them together. Her diligence paid off when she discovered another anomaly. One morning, while taking her usual route past 42 Elmwood Drive, she spotted a delivery van parked in front of the house. This wasn't unusual. Packages often arrived at vacant properties, but something about this particular van struck her as strange. The logo on its side advertised a local plumbing company, yet Karen had never heard of it before. More importantly, the driver didn't unload any tools or supplies. Instead, he hurried inside and emerged moments later carrying a large duffel bag. Karen's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without hesitation, she snapped a photo of the van with her phone, careful to remain inconspicuous. Then, pretending to tie her shoelace, she crouched near a bush and waited until the driver drove away. Once he was gone, she sent the photo to the agents along with a description of what she'd seen. Within minutes, they responded. "Excellent. We're tracking the vehicle now. Stay alert." As the days turned into weeks, Karen began to settle into her dual role. By day, she remained the meticulous HOA enforcer, ensuring everyone followed the rules and maintaining the neighborhood's pristine appearance. By night, she transformed into a covert operative, gathering intelligence and relaying it to the agents. Though the secrecy weighed heavily on her at times, she found herself enjoying the thrill of the mission. For once, her nosiness had a purpose. Beyond enforcing trivial regulations, it was helping to protect her community. Still, the pressure wasn't easy to manage. There were moments when Karen questioned whether she was truly making a difference or simply getting in over her head. She worried constantly about being discovered, especially since the agents had warned her that the criminals they were targeting were both cunning and ruthless. Every knock on her door or unfamiliar face in the neighborhood sent her pulse racing. Yet despite her fears, she refused to back down. She had committed to this operation, and she intended to see it through to the end. One evening, as Karen sat at her kitchen table reviewing her notes, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Who would have thought that breaking into an abandoned house would lead her here? Just a few months ago, her biggest concern had been convincing Mr. Peterson to repaint his front door. Now, she was playing a key role in a secret government sting operation. Life had a funny way of surprising you, she mused. Little did Karen know her efforts were about to pay off in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The agents had been piecing together the information she provided, cross-referencing it with their own findings. Slowly but surely, they were closing in on the criminal organization. And as the net tightened, Karen's contributions became increasingly vital. She may have started as an accidental investigator, but she was quickly becoming an indispensable asset to the team. For the first time in her life, Karen felt like she was truly making a difference, not just for her neighborhood but for the greater good. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. After all, she reminded herself with a wry smile, she wasn't just Karen from the HOA anymore. She was Karen, the unlikely hero. As the weeks went by, Karen's role in the operation grew more complex and more dangerous. What had started as casual observations and minor reports soon escalated into something far more intense. The agents began relying on her for increasingly specific tasks, asking her to monitor particular individuals or even retrieve items left behind by suspects. At first, Karen hesitated. These assignments felt riskier than anything she'd done before, and the thought of getting caught terrified her. But each time she completed a task successfully, she gained confidence. She wasn't just an ordinary citizen anymore. She was part of something bigger. One chilly evening, as Karen returned home after another round of neighborhood surveillance, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Agent Harris, one of the two men who had recruited her. Karen, the text read, "We need your help tonight. Can you meet us at 42 Elmwood Drive at 10 p.m.? Important development." Her stomach flipped at the request. Nighttime meetings were rare, and they usually meant something urgent or risky was happening. Still, Karen didn't hesitate. She replied immediately, "I'll be there." By the time she arrived at the house, the street was shrouded in darkness. Only the faint glow of distant streetlights illuminated the path leading up to 42 Elmwood Drive. Karen approached cautiously, clutching her flashlight and wearing her most sensible shoes. As she slipped through the familiar opening in the side panel, she found Agent Harris and his partner, Agent Carter, waiting for her inside the hidden passageway. "Thanks for coming, Karen," Harris said quietly, motioning for her to follow them deeper into the secret room. The air was tense, charged with an energy that made Karen's skin prickle. Something big was about to happen. That much was clear. Once they were settled in front of the surveillance monitors, Carter spoke. "We've identified a key player in the organization, a courier who moves sensitive information between members. Tonight, we believe he'll be making a drop-off near the park. We need you to confirm his identity and track his movements without being seen." Karen blinked, startled by the request. Tracking someone in broad daylight was one thing, but following a suspected criminal in the dead of night? That sounded like something out of a spy movie, not real life. "Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" she asked, her voice wavering slightly. "What if I mess up?" Harris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've been doing great so far, Karen. Trust us. This is why we brought you in. You know the area better than anyone, and you blend in seamlessly. Just stick to the plan and you'll be fine." With no other choice but to trust their judgment, Karen nodded reluctantly. They handed her a small earpiece and a lightweight jacket equipped with a hidden camera. "This will allow us to see and hear everything you do," Carter explained. "If anything goes wrong, signal us immediately, and we'll extract you." Karen swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. This wasn't just about keeping her neighborhood clean anymore. It was about stopping criminals who posed a real threat. She couldn't afford to fail. At exactly 9:45 p.m., Karen set out toward the park, sticking to the shadows as instructed. Her heart pounded in rhythm with her footsteps as she scanned the area for signs of the courier. The park was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Karen hugged the jacket tighter around herself, both for warmth and reassurance. Then, just as Harris had predicted, she spotted him, a tall man in a hoodie, walking briskly along the edge of the playground. In one hand, he carried a backpack, its contents unknown but likely valuable. Karen recognized him instantly from the photos the agents had shown her earlier. It was him, the courier. Staying low, Karen followed at a safe distance, careful not to make any sudden movements. Her training kicked in as she focused on maintaining a steady pace while avoiding detection. Every step felt like it echoed loudly in the stillness. But somehow, the courier didn't notice her presence. After several minutes of trailing him, the man stopped near a bench and glanced around nervously. Satisfied that no one was watching, He bent down and retrieved a small package tucked beneath the seat. He examined it briefly before slipping it into his backpack and continuing on his route. Karen whispered into her earpiece, describing everything she saw in detail. He picked up a package from under the bench, she murmured softly. It looked like a small box, maybe 6 inches wide. He's heading east now, toward the parking lot. Good work, Karen, Harris replied in her ear. Stay with him, but don't get too close. Let us know when he makes contact with anyone else. For the next 20 minutes, Karen trailed the courier as he zigzagged through the park, occasionally pausing to check his surroundings. Finally, he reached the parking lot where a black sedan idled near the entrance. A second man stepped out of the car, exchanged a few words with the courier, and accepted the package. Then, without further ado, the sedan sped away. Karen exhaled, sharply, her nerves finally easing as the immediate danger passed. They're gone, she reported. The courier handed off the package to someone in a black sedan. License plate number. Let me check. She squinted at the retreating vehicle, memorizing the digits before relaying them to Harris. Perfect, Harris said. You did great, Karen. Head back to the house now. We'll take it from here. Relieved but exhilarated, Karen retraced, her steps to 42 Elmwood Drive. When she returned to the hidden room, both agents greeted her with approving nods. That was textbook work, Carter said. You stayed calm, followed protocol, and provided critical intel. Thanks to you, we're closer than ever to dismantling this operation. Karen beamed with pride. For years she'd been dismissed as a nosy busybody, someone whose contributions amounted to little more than enforcing trivial rules. But tonight, she had proven herself capable of much more. She had played a vital role in catching criminals and possibly saving lives. Over the next few days, Karen noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Several unfamiliar faces disappeared, and certain houses that had once raised suspicions suddenly fell silent. The agents kept her updated on their progress, though they remained tight-lipped about specifics. We're closing in, Harris told her during one of their briefings. Your efforts have paid off in ways you can't imagine. Despite the praise, Karen knew the operation wasn't over yet. There were still loose ends to tie up, connections to sever, and risks to mitigate. But for the first time since this wild adventure began, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. Not only had she risen to the challenge, but she had also discovered a strength within herself she never knew existed. Still, Karen couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. She had walked into situations that could have easily gone wrong, and she knew how lucky she'd been so far. Would her luck hold out until the very end? Or would her involvement eventually catch up with her? For now, though, Karen pushed those thoughts aside. She had a job to finish, and she intended to see it through no matter what.